Okay, thank you. Yeah, a different approach to user-centred design too, Andrews. We're working in the area of energy demand reduction in the home. And as we all know, climate change is here and very real for us all. And with it, this need to reduce CO2. And one of the biggest offenders is our houses and the things we do in our houses, with 29% of CO2 emissions coming from the domestic sector. Over half of that from our space heating and our poorly insulated houses. But this one's a surprise offender is our power showers. So an 8-minute power shower can be the same as a hot bath in terms of energy use. And the worst offenders are the teenage boys. What's on? No. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. So the government obviously trying to do something about domestic energy emissions. And we're already having things like solar panels taking 8% now of daytime energy generated from people's homes. Not quite so popular now, the subsidies are not quite so good. And then recently, last year, we saw the Green Deal initiative from the government, which has been extremely low level of uptake, but it's there as a financing scheme to try to make our houses more efficient. Come in and talked about, and particularly in this kind of wireless technology field, is smart metering, with the contract awarded last year, I think I know O2 were involved in it, and and so we're going to have smart meters in all our homes, providing much better data and opportunities for the smart grid, for the suppliers, and for the users. It's supposed to be giving the user better feedback on their actual energy use in the home. And the mandate has this need to provide user feedback through a display to the consumer, unless they overtly say they don't want it, apparently. So you get in their earlier versions these quite basic displays that, from our research, sit mainly in people's kitchen drawers, and after initial kind of play, not really fitting in with everyday life. But, so, it's going to be a big market. Home energy management systems from people like AlertMe, coming in with smartphone apps, much better user interfaces, much more moving towards a kind of consumer product. And over the last few months, we've seen the British Gas Hive intelligent heating coming in. And then the second plug for the Nest today, I think. Google spending 1.8 million on acquiring the Nest company with its two products of a thermostat and a smoke alarm, showing this interest again in the sort of domestic market and in their home energy monitoring. And we're, through our research and through seeing what's coming on the market, we're moving towards this disaggregation of energy data as well. So systems be able to tell you how much energy your fridge is using, how much that costs in money. Companies talk to us about how they can maybe nudge you that it's time to get a new fridge. So we're seeing immense activity in this area, lots of information being pumped at people, lots of technology coming into the home space, lots of different wireless networks and providers competing in the home space. And it's almost like, well, who owns it? Is it the broadband companies? Is it the utilities? Who is it that owns this space? It's a very complex, uncertain market, I think, for technology. And we're heading towards Internet of Things, much more connectivity, the Weebee, for example, all sorts of things to be able to talk to each other in the home. So it's complex, there's loads of opportunities, but we're still in this situation where people don't care that much. Some people will be buying into smart products because they like smart products, but energy's still a low-interest product. Energy's featureless, it's something that's constant. We talk about when we get a power cut because it's an unusual thing in the UK. So we're not really that bothered on a day-to-day basis about our diminishing stocks of fossil fuels. Most people just going about their everyday lives. You can spend a lot of money doing this beautiful cladding, but in terms of getting the money back, it's still a very uncertain, difficult equation. So it's complex. It involves a lot of complex decision-making, so a lot of people just choose to do nothing still. And above all else, it's about comfort and convenience, the way we live our everyday lives. And so people are much more interested in just getting on with things. So anything that comes into the home needs to be low effort. And so if we're going to reduce energy demand in the home, we're looking for low effort solutions that hopefully enhance comfort and convenience. And this is where the project I'm working on at the moment, we've been going about 3 years, the LEADER project has been sitting in this space. It's low effort energy demand reduction. It's government funded, and we've got partners from O2 and AlertMe and E.ON as advisory team. We've got 20 kind of middle class, I'd say, homes in Loughborough that are taking part in the project. Families have been committed to the project for 3-4 years. So our design aspirations are to design into the messy everyday space with new solutions, new ways of saving energy, fitting in with the clutter and the kind of mess of everyday life. It's multidisciplinary, and it's been nowadays to get energy demand reduction projects, particularly from the government, looking for these interdisciplinary teams. So we've got the design school where I sit, social scientists, mainly anthropologists, and a strong engineering team from civil and building engineering scientists working together, trying to design in this middle space. And it's quite an unusual project because I've worked on a lot of these projects over the year. We're all located at Loughborough, and it has actually been quite a lot of really banging disciplines up against each other and people holding their heads in pain, etc., trying to design in this space. We've got basic home energy monitoring kit in everybody's homes. So for the 20 houses, have gas monitored, I think, every 5 minutes. So it's much smaller than you get from a smart meter. All electricity monitored at an appliance level as well as a mains level. Hot water monitoring as well. So more data than we can possibly know what to do with is what we found. And we're finding things like this. So house 5 in our sample of 20 and house 43. There is some logic there because not everyone that started in the process were actually in the trial eventually. Very, very similar with social economics, very similar in the nature of their houses and the level of kind of efficiency. But this massive gap in terms of their energy consumption, one using much, much more energy than the other. So we come in with the social science and design teams trying to understand why these two houses are so different and why all our houses are using energy in different ways. So these were design activities early on in the project, whereas this is our getting to know you over a takeaway meal, some wine in this case, trying to get to know the families as a unit, and they were carrying out some tasks which are about understanding their everyday routines, but particularly trying to build trust with these families before we start crawling over their lives a little bit more with video ethnography. They've been fantastic, our families. We've only lost one, and that's because they moved out of the area. So coming in, looking at how people do their laundry, bathrooming practices, cooking, use of digital media in the homes. And we've worked with an anthropologist called Sarah Pink, who's now gone out to Australia. She's got this ethnographic method called sensory ethnography. And it's very experiential and fits very well with kind of user experience design. And it's got these 3 different ways of looking at the houses. First one is thinking about how people use the spaces in their home to create different spaces. So this lady here, that's their dining room, but it's also a home office on different days during the week. And she relates to that bit of a house in different ways, depending on her different roles. We do use a reenactment technique where people be in videos as they reenact for us their daily routines, getting up in the morning, going to bed at night, fully clothed as this guy you can see here, but it gives us a feel for the rhythm and the routines and then how energy use fits into that. And then probably most importantly, we're interested in just how they create an experience of home. Because of other projects we worked on when we've looked at things like home improvement, people do things to their homes because they want their home to feel a particular way, or they want people to think about them as a family in particular ways. They're not necessarily rational decisions, they're experiential. And so we look at people's perceptions of heat and air movement, sound and light, how these all kind of move through the homes. And we see people really sensitive to, we shut these doors at night because of the noise of the washing machine and the kid, and there's lots of intricate things we do without even thinking about it to manage our homes, which are all impacting on our energy use. Well, not all, but most in some way. And so we're there with all this stuff about people's everyday lives, because they've given us fantastic opportunities to see how they live, and we've got all this quantitative data about how they use energy in their homes. And we've tried to bring it together. I put this up, not for you to read, but just the holy grail in energy research is to bring together activities, practices, and how much energy they use, and can we somehow kind of map the two together. It's so complex that to design into that, we just can't do. But it just shows the complexity. This is just one family's laundry. So we've created much more happy as in a design school with personas, but we've got our 6 different persona families, different lifestyles and attitudes from our data. But we've also brought in some of the ethnographic knowledge about how they go about, in this case, their laundry. And then the quantitative energy data, also archetypal. So we get a feel for, here's a typical family that uses a lot of energy, and they do these kind of things, and they've got these sorts of attitudes. And it starts to be a little bit more manageable. So then we've been trying to say, well, how can we reduce energy, given what we know about these families? This is where you start to put your head above the parapet. The move in energy research is very much towards disaggregation of data, as they call it. So can we start to see what's using energy in the home? On another project I work in, they're looking at, can we find out how many kilowatts used to make the breakfast? You know, there's lots of this trying to break down energy use. But our gut feeling from all our research is that people are still in their busy lives, not going to relate to necessarily all these breakdowns of what you're using in your house, because you're adding more complexity and more things to process, more decisions to make in some ways. Some people will, but not everybody. So our designing with the grain, really, is how can we use all this sophisticated control that's coming into the home through home energy management systems, the Internet of Things. Can we use it to save energy? Yes, quite possibly, but we've got to fit into the busyness and the rhythm of people's everyday lives. You've got this guy screaming in your ear, that's going to really affect the sorts of decisions you're making as you're trying to do numerous things around the house. So one thing we found, and you think we spent all this money and all this research, and the one thing that came out stronger than anything else was time. Time is a tangible resource for people. People buy time. They pay a cleaner £20 to come and clean on a Friday afternoon, etc. And they juggle time, and they do lots of things at the same time, and they're very good at doing complex things with time. Energy isn't tangible in that way. So in our ideation, we've been trying to kind of bring the two together. So assuming we're heading for this kind of world where things start to be able to talk to each other, we see all sorts of possibilities opening up. Back to Nest again, a couple of days ago, there were quite a few reports about the API that Nest have released and how, say, Mercedes are working with Nest, the Fitband people, Jawbone, I think, coming up with all these complex ways of things talking to each other. So this, you think, well, there's promise here, the fact that heating can come on as the car approaches the house, starting to get into comfort and convenience again. In our work, we've come up with something very similar, where we're trying to look at smart control, where people make decisions with a very simple interface about when things come on and off, assuming this kind of smart environment. So there's a layer that sits below this, which I don't have with me. But can you set the idea of Kairos for my colleague is you've got time starting from now all the time, so you're not having to complexly think about different times a day. So can we set the washing machine so that if the baby stirs at night, the spin goes to slow? It can be a very simple interaction with a device, perhaps. But it's one of the reasons we found that families don't leave the washing in the machine soggy because of the waking the baby, for example. So there's simple decisions in people's lives. When I come in the door from work, start the final rinse of the machine. So it's going the same way as the Nest kind of systems, but we think it needs to have a very intuitive front end. In our playing around with time, we're coming to the idea of can you kind of just prompt and nudge people to do things, but with the kind of persuasion that it's going to save you time at a different point in the week. So when there's solar PV, rather than telling use your solar PV now because it's going to save you money, do your laundry now because it's going to save you time at the weekend. It's going to buy you time at the weekend. So that's not very clear there, but it says laundry today, free the weekend. The idea of the disjointed image is that if your house is using more energy than optimal, then the image is fragmenting, and it's giving people a prompt that perhaps something's wrong. So it's kind of a background kind of app, and people could then go and choose to use other smart things, but in nudging them perhaps. This one's perhaps the most hard to understand in this kind of situation. But one thing that's come out of all the research is, can we give the home a personality, a heartbeat was where we wanted to go originally, but the heartbeat was too alarming and just shocking for people. But can we show when the house is stressed? Can we make people think about the house as another member of the family so they become a little bit more concerned about its welfare? It's kind of reflecting back some sort of personality. So this is a animated, jaggy image that shapes, changes. You can flick it around the screen, bounce it, etc. Can't see which colour it is. The pink, when you're using lots of energy, the thing starts to become very jagged. And again, it's prompting people that something's not quite right. But we're tying it in with time. So if the family's very busy at that period as well, then the green, you got lots of green as well. So the busyness from the family from a synced calendar is showing busy, busy, also showing lots of energy use. Because we've seen in our research when people are busy, they tend to waste more energy. They may like being busy, but can we prompt them to see that actually that's having an impact on this house and it's starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable? So we think it's an amazing time in terms of the sort of revolution we've gone through in mobile. We're now starting to see in the home with these smart technologies. Lots and lots of potential, and needs consideration of the people. You can't just put in really nice, pretty products. They've got to be user-centred. And so we need to particularly take into account, we think, these rhythms of everyday life and be thinking about those when we're designing. It's not enough that something is very usable. We think it does need to fit into this kind of grain of everyday life. So a bit of a whirlwind through, but this is an example of a kind of user-centred project where hopefully you're seeing things being taken perhaps in a slightly different direction than if we just kind of work with the engineering data.